This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Real Deal, where I'm very pleased to have as my featured guest this evening, Steve Dack, who's going to talk about his response to my video 9/11, who is responsible and why. Steve, I'm so pleased to have you here to undertake this exchange, because rational criticism, exchange of evidence, and further inquiry is the path to truth.
Well, thanks for having me, Jim. It's really my pleasure. I first want to thank you for really being a stalwart in the truth movement and providing a venue for controversial and sometimes unpopular theories. I'd like to thank my good friends at Let's Roll Forums and JT, who's we don't know who that is, but thank you for stirring the pot. I'd like to thank truthers everywhere for keeping the truth movement going. And I'd also like to thank my nemesis, the international skeptics, who are the debunkers out there, who really keep me honest. I don't have any peers that I can go to, but I tell you, if you ever can't find a link or can't remember a bit of information, just go out there and get in their faces, and they're better than LexisNexis, I'll tell you, for finding it.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's good to know, Steve.
All right, well, let's get going here. Let's see. When you mentioned the size, we go into this thing with the size of the Google Earth gash, and this is something that really is vexing for a long time for me. I don't know if you've heard this, but the theory that goes that the gash pre-existed 9/11, right? The Shanksville gash. It was the whole theory goes that it pre-existed 9/11, and all they did was drop a bomb in the middle of it to make the central gash. What I think is going on here is that they really did actually choose the location for the Shanksville gash because of this photograph. This is right around the time when I believe they were preparing for 9/11 in the late 80s and early 90s. So this is in 94 when the USGS photo was taken of the Shanksville area. And this is often misunderstood as being the Shanksville crater. It's not so. It's not the same location or orientation, okay? The size of this crater, you can use Google Earth's measurement tools to get a good size of it. You go to the very tip of the gash, the Shanksville gash, it's like 130 feet. So it is close to the size of a 757 wingspan, okay?
Which of course is 124 feet.
Yeah, around there. Thank you for that. I don't remember those details very well. A lot of the locals did hear missiles. There are several examples of missile witnesses, people who heard or saw missiles, and some of them were like in combat and knew what they sounded like.
Yeah, you didn't want to go through their testimony?
Oh yeah, we can. Sorry. Yeah. So you can see here, looking straight down into the flight.
No, it was the previous slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If you go back one, Steve.
How do I do that here? Let's go.
Well, just
there we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
So several local people believe they hear a missile overhead just before Flight 93 goes down. Barry Lichty, U.S. Navy veteran and mayor of Indian Lake Borough, just to the east of the Flight 93 crashes, is watching television with his wife when he hears a loud roar above the house that sounded like a missile. Shortly thereafter, he hears an explosion and a tremor. His first reaction as a former utility employee was that maybe someone shot a missile into the substation. He says, Flight 93 did not come over my house. I don't know what we heard. And there are others as well who say this. I want to cut to the chase because
go for it.
Because I'm not good at reading these things when I'm under pressure. But yeah, when I look at the gash itself, and when you look at the history of the area, I mean the witnesses who saw these things happen, it sure looks to me like this was a missile attack at Shanksville. People, some people scoff at that, thinking, why would they do that? Shoot missiles into the ground? Because, well, they have to. They're making a mock-up of a crash site, and
right.
And they're going to believe anything we're going to believe anything the television tells us, really.
Right. So if it looks remotely or even vaguely like it might be, their interpretation is going to carry the day.
Well, yeah, and because we were showing it on television that shows planes cutting through steel, and because we were showing at the Pentagon the planes cutting through concrete and brick buildings, then it makes sense that they can cut into the ground and leave a outline of a plane. So that's what we're told. But there are witnesses, like Susan McElwain actually saw a missile fly over her van, and I thought I had that in this slide set here somewhere. I guess I didn't.
It may show up. You got the
include
possible path of the small white jet, no wider than my van, which sounds like a missile, not a plane.
Yeah, and that's what she witnessed, and I really am sorry to not have
Well, maybe
included that.
maybe it's going to show up. Maybe
It's I don't know. It should have been right here. In any case, she did see this, and there is video of her describing it. A small white plane, no wider than her van, and she describes a missile with jets at the tail end, and she says it banks over the trees. It had to be below the tree line, banks to the right, and crashes. Well, if you follow her description, this is where she was located, and this is the tree line she was describing, and this is where the crash site was. It makes sense that she saw one of the missiles. I believe there were multiples. And
oh, you believe more than one missile was fired to create the impression?
Well, yeah, because the reason for this is because it's reproducible and predictable, and you can do this using NASA's own meteorite trajectory exercises. Anybody can do this with a slingshot or a pellet gun, or I used pellet guns for this in this particular case, and an explosive, and in this case that was a firecracker. But these gashes are predictable and reproducible. Any police ballistics department can do it, can tell you where the shooter is based on the shape of the missile hole or the bullet hole. And so it's not rocket science, I like to say. And using for this example here, this is the size of a crater made by like a 200-pound explosive is about 30 feet around. This is based on avalanche explosions that they use to break up avalanches. So that's the size of the gash in Shanksville. Was around the central crater was around 30 feet around and about 8 to 15 feet deep. Well, that fits the exact size of the warhead that is carried by the JSAM warhead. The JSAM is a joint air-to-surface standoff missile, and I use it as an example of the technology that was available at the time. This is off-the-shelf technology, nothing special about it. And
the example of technology that was known to the public to be available at the time. Exactly.
And the capabilities and size of warhead that can accomplish the evidence as encountered at the site.
Good.
So if we look at, the gash that I created here, it's scalable. You can make the same gash depending on the size of the warhead you're using, and the JSAM had that kind of warhead. It's a 900-pound 5 foot long. It's 12 by 60 inches, 900 pounds of dense metal. 240 pounds of that is explosive. And so if you look at the gash, it can be created by the warhead itself, and then the central explosion is caused by the warhead detonating. I thought I had this sorted out better than this, but this is just the 1994 photo that is often misunderstood for the Shanksville gash. This is to demonstrate that it is not the same thing, not even close. This is the direction of the Shanksville gash. This is the 1994 gash. Please, truthers, can we just stop repeating that? It's not true. That's one way they discredit us, actually, is to spread disinformation like this that says, hey, the Shanksville crater was pre-existing, and all we had to do is explode a bomb in it. In fact, that's even in part of the movie that was sent out, Operation Terror, very popular hypothesis in the
Art Olivier.
Yeah, but it's wrong. It discredits us to repeat wrong information. So please, let's get past that.
Right, truthers are supposed to promote truths, not falsehoods.
Yeah, it's not a matter of being popular, it's a matter of the truth.
Right.
A lot of people think that the gash pre-existed as well because the grass was growing from it. That is also not true. And I can tell you, after digging many ditches in my life, there's a reason why the grass looks like it's growing in it, because clumps of grass that have long grass fronds growing from it will fall back into a trench, grass side up. So
Hey,
if
I dug ditches too for one summer with the South Pasadena Water Department.
Yeah, so you know then, and you can also undermine the sod, and the sod will maintain its shape and follow the contours of your trench that you just dug, because the sod is like a net that's over the top of your soil. So if a warhead had burrowed through the ground, it would have dug out the sod, the ground beneath the sod, and it would have followed back into the trench. And that's what you see. Let me get to the, I don't know how these things got out of order. You can see it in the, I'll back up. Right here, you can see what looks like grass growing from the trench. Well, this photograph was taken about 200, maybe 300 feet away through a long field of tall grass. So if you follow all these grass fronds down, they are actually in the foreground, not in the trench, growing from the trench. And look at this. I mean, we talk about smoke machines later at the Pentagon, but look at this. You have this burst of white smoke here coming from the inside of the crater, right?
Do you think that's coming from a smoke machine?
Well, I do. Look at the next picture. You can see it's on the outside of the crater over here. So they had a little mobile smoke machine, and they were going around trying to make the place look, it's just like the Pentagon, where they tried to make it look worse than it really was.
Yeah.
And you got these guys just standing around. There's nothing to do there. There's no lives to save. There's nothing even to look at. But they're just
no plane to recover, no parts to pick up.
And they're just moving a smoke machine.
No crime scene tape to put down.
Exactly. And you can see here now the smoke machine's back in the middle here. But here you can see a tree is split in half. So these scorched trees here were more than just a burnt out field. Let me back up a ways to get to the you can see that it's more than just burnt out. Something detonated there. That split a tree right in half. And that's not easy to do. So I don't, they launched a few missiles. Is what it looks like.
Are you saying they were rather amateurish at producing their Hollywood-style special effects?
I think that they had a bunch of missiles that they wanted to use that weren't in inventory and that could do the thing they needed to have done.
Create the impression that something had happened there.
Yeah, and they were selling planes, and so planes was the story. You can see here, this chunk here is burnt and smoldering. Something blew up there. Look at that tree.
Yeah.
Look at that thing, split right down the middle. That's not just a fire. Something detonated in the trees. And so, there's missiles all over this crash site. And you'll find that missiles are one of the things that people think of happened at the Pentagon, right? I don't know why it's brushed off so much at Shanksville, but people really don't like that idea.
Well, I don't know. To me, it's a novelty, Steve. I mean, I love it. I mean, what we're doing really is tweaking or fine-tuning that no plane crashed at Shanksville to reconstruct how it was done, that they attempted to simulate a plane having crashed there when they were very limited in their resources.
Right. Something had to cut the hole in the ground, and they either dug it by hand or, I mean, you look at the debris here too. It looks like it's just been buried there and just blown up, and like someone dug a hole, like you've described, dug a hole and dumped a bunch of garbage.
Colonel George Nelson, right. Looked to him like someone had taken a bulldozer out there, dug a trench, filled it with trash, and blown it up.
Exactly. Well, the history of the site is that it's an abandoned strip mine that had been backfilled after it had reached its terminal, production level. And so they backfilled it. Well, what do they backfill it with? They usually use a lot of shale and the same debris that they dug out, and anything else that they have to truck in is usually just crap dirt. So they could have easily chosen this site in 1994, which is a year after the first bombing took place. So say the first bombing in 1993 is their start date. This is the go live date. They're giving themselves a patsy in the name, in the face of the Islam thing. They have a
right.
They're
terrorists.
Yeah, they're setting up the World Trade Center as a target for terrorism.
Right.
So they're setting the pre-story for the big show in 7-8 years. So if you think about it on that term, and also in the 90s was also the time that you saw all the conspiracy sites start showing up. Alex Jones, Jeff Rentz, Above Top Secret. All of these are set up in order to put a lock on all of the venues that would be out there where people are going to be talking about what happened on 9/11. So they're going to have a venue where you're going to be talking about what happened on 9/11, which should really be a crime investigation. But you're going to be talking about it with Bigfoot and Project Bluebeam and alien invasions and whatever else you're going to get in all these conspiracy sites, right? So you're automatically given a tinfoil hat when you talk about 9/11. So I think that they set this up from the 90s. And if you think about that, then yeah, they easily could have dumped a bunch of garbage in a trench that they were planning on bombing later. Okay?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like a stretch to me.
Not far-fetched at all.
So, and if you look at the site, yeah, they moved that smoke machine around. To me, that is evidence of smoke machines. We shouldn't even be arguing about that anymore.
Well, it's just ridiculous. The whole smoke machine thing is stunning. They used one in Boston too, believe it or not.
I don't doubt it, because that's what they do. These are military operations, and they have military equipment to use up. Of course they're going to launch missiles. Missiles have been the big stick of choice that the U.S. military has been using since the 80s, right? Cruise missiles. You can't have, there's no diplomatic solution that hasn't first been softened up by a few tomahawks. And so, yeah, I think missiles make a lot of sense, especially if you consider that at the Pentagon, a lot of people think missiles were used there. And the way I look at it, if the evidence, as I've seen, is consistent, then it makes sense to use the same means at all sites, because then you have fewer people involved, fewer people that need to know. One group of missile jockeys for all sites. And
Wow.
if the evidence fits that, so be it. But if it doesn't, then there's got to be a better explanation for it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mentioned that clump of dirt, and this is often pointed out as being proof that grass was growing in the trench. Well, you can see it's different colored grass. You can see here the grass along the edge of the trench.
Yeah.
Well, I just see that as a trench burrowed out and undermined the sod, which then fell back into the trench, and like any clump of sod with long grass on it, it falls grass side up. Not a rocket, nothing special about this, nothing to see here. Same deal here, just reiterating what I just explained about how the grass is not growing from the trench. It just looks like it. Really, truthers, we got to get over this. More of the same.
Well, go back to that one a sec.
Yeah, that was just me explaining what I had just explained.
I just want to read them.
Sure. So the thing is, I can't get the actual measurements of this gash. We don't have access to the site anymore. We didn't get our tape measure out there, so it's all really just guesstimates.
Yeah, but this is a good slide, Steve, because you're bringing together several elements.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so if at a very shallow angle of less than 10 degrees from horizontal, which like I said earlier, and on the next slide, which shows that NASA says any projectile at less than 10 degrees from horizontal will make an elongated crater like this. And any kid who's ever hit a stick against the ground can attest to that.
And that's what they wanted, of course.
Yeah, and I think that's why they set out the rumor that the gash pre-existed 9/11, because anybody who's ever shot a bullet into the ground would be able to look at that gash and say, wait a minute, anybody can do that. Just a couple bullets at slight trajectories and you've got the Shanksville crater. So I think they put out that rumor to get out ahead of anybody coming to this conclusion. So I'm no genius, I'll tell you that. But in any case, if you take the NASA photos of the meteorites, they look familiar, don't they? Especially if you mirror them and compare it to the Shanksville gash, you can see that a mirrored image, just say the two meteorites striking at opposite directions, create a gash like that.
Very interesting.
Now I can, this is what I gotta get some water here, but this is what a real plane looks like when it hits the ground. They don't burrow into the ground like they show at Shanksville.
Right.
They crash into the ground and they are mostly hollow. This is a JSAM missile, or a model of one. It's 14 feet long, has a wingspan of about 8 feet. It looks like a plane. It is a terrain-hugging cruise missile that has a range of, I don't know how many hundreds of miles and a speed of, I don't know how many hundreds of miles an hour, but it is designed for punching through hardened targets prior to detonating. So it doesn't need to detonate to cut through a concrete bunker. And some of the slides I neglected to include had all of the capabilities of the warhead to explain how easy it would be and how accurate they are for them to be able to create that gash.
I already think that your suggestion, you know, I didn't really attempt to explain the defects in the ground more so than to cite, you know, Colonel Nelson's observation, which was more or less a throwaway. I certainly think you're making good use of the available evidence to support the idea of the use of a missile here, Steve. I think you're probably right.
Well, thank you. And so, yeah, I do too. This is I don't know who made this slide set, but it wasn't me. This is me talking. I wanted to not have the sound play. Let me see. Get that, go there. And mute that? Okay. Okay. So they are air launched, and Susan McElwain described seeing 2 fighter jets at a high altitude, and that can definitely explain where the missiles came from. They are designed for punching through hardened targets. Therefore, the hard, dry, rocky soil of Shanksville would have been child's play for these things. And they look like a plane when they fly overhead. So, and she described seeing a small white plane fly right over, and they are basically the size of what she described.
Right. No, I agree with all this.
Thank you. Okay, good. So, given that, we don't really need to, I mean, I can go through the rest of the slides. Okay, stop.
Well, for the benefit of those who may be not yet convinced, yeah, go through the rest of your slides. That's fine.
I only have a couple more for Shanksville. Somehow I missed, I don't know, a dozen of them. But I can go on and on and on for these. And if we have more in the future, I'm gonna add more and pile on as we go, because I'm.
Well, you're doing great. I'm real happy.
Well, thanks. This is the what's her name, McClatchy.
Val McClatchy.
Yeah, or McClatchy.
McClatchy.
It's this is the explosion of an ordnance blast. I mean, there's no doubt at all about that. But even like you said, the photo is fraudulent. It's
right. It's photoshopped. Yeah.
Yeah, it's photoshopped. So whatever happened there, it's not represented in that photo. But this is an example of what they give us as evidence.
Right, as proof.
They really
and as I explained too. I mean, from a plane crash, you got black smoke. You don't have this kind of a little puffy gray thing. It's
exactly, and it would be a column of smoke that would it would have some hang time. It would
very
go on
substantial.
For miles.
That's right.
And so, and then these, I don't know why I thought this was significant, but
well, it was a parallel.
This is the location of Val, and this was the location of Susan McElwain.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to be comparing slides or something in this presentation.
You're doing great. I'm real happy.
So that's about as much as I was going to bring on the mix here about Shanksville.
That's fine. Steve, it's good. I think you.
Long videos.
I think what you have done is highly complimentary. My point was primarily establishing no plane had crashed there. You've gone further to explain how it was done. It looks to me like you've got a very good case that you have already made.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to try to get down to Pentagon here. Let me see if I can't share properly. You might want to pause it, Jim.
Okay. Go.
Okay, so the Pentagon released images of the, and this is what I mean. I thought we might be, I'm not sure what I was doing on this, but I was hoping to be able to use some of your slides.
Well, you could always do that.
Go back and forth. Actually, I think I do have your slide set around here somewhere.
Yeah, I sent it to you.
But yeah.
The missile trail, right?
Are you seeing that?
Yeah, but this is now in New York, right?
Yeah. Okay.
You want to go for?
You were talking about what were you talking about?
You're going way back up. Pentagon is way up there.
Yeah. Any case, you were showing the the photos of the cruise missile or the impact shots of the Pentagon.
Well, I'm showing the 5 frames from the Pentagon and the one of the small flying object above the gate mechanism with a white plume.
Yeah.
A white plume not being jet exhaust, but potentially the exhaust from a jet being fired by what I now take to be a Global Hawk.
Yeah. So it was this one, I believe.
Yes, top left.
Yeah. So looking at these, that is supposed to be the vapor trail of a missile. And from what I've learned, I am no authority. I've done a lot of studying, a lot of reading, and they don't leave vapor trails like that unless they're doing a solid fuel rocket launch, like a Tomahawk uses solid fuel to get out of the tubes in a submarine, for example, and then it'll switch to jet power, which doesn't leave a vapor trail. Because, a cruise missile, a stealthy cruise missile is not very stealthy if it's going to leave a trail. So that, I think, is a doctored photograph. I don't think that's indicative of
I think
of a
that,
real event.
and there's no sign that there actually was a fireball at the Pentagon. I mean, that's amazing. When you look at the area down here at this bottom 14 slide down there on my set, number 14 in the list. See, there's no signs of a fire damage, of an intense fire there. You've even got this Oxford Unabridged Dictionary on the 3rd or 4th floor there.
Yeah, but here you do on the face of the thing. So but you don't see, because you don't see the penetration hole in the Pentagon face. They had to collapse the building. I agree with that. You mentioned that they had to collapse the
because otherwise it was so implausible a plane had hit there.
It is. It's absolutely true. And then it had to punch through all of this whole row of rings.
Through the C ring anyway.
Yeah. Well, didn't it go through the whole thing?
EDC. No, I don't know of any claim.
C ring. Yeah. So it goes through the third one. The third one here, right?
Right.
So it goes through, but that it didn't leave a similar hole in the beginning.
No, it's ridiculous. The whole thing is so ridiculous.
Yeah,
you can see they were just trying to sort of generally,
it wasn't their
scope it out,
it wasn't their A team that had sorted this thing out, and they knew that their audience would buy it. That's what
they knew. Their audience was very gullible and scientifically illiterate.
Well, we'll believe anything that they tell us because we believe authority by virtue of their authority.
Isn't it embarrassing?
To do from birth, isn't it?
Isn't it embarrassing?
So we're taught to believe that this is what happened. I mean, it not just.
Those Purdue people were just awful.
Can you believe this?
They had an animation. They had an animation of 175 hitting the South Tower that was ridiculous.
Yeah, I will refer to that a lot.
By and by, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, this is what we were told, that it would cut down street lamps, bored through the Pentagon's brick and concrete facade, mowed down a forest of reinforced concrete pillars, and that's their term, a forest of them.
Well, this is why the plane got shredded, see?
Yeah, and then it punched a circular 12-foot exit hole.
Right.
But look at the debris it left. I mean, so something had to have been big enough to punch through that, but it dumps out this little burp of debris.
I just don't see any plane parts there, Steve.
Yeah, they're just not there, are they? So yeah, it is insulting to the intelligence, but what I think they did here is what I've concluded is that a single missile could not do that. You and I agree it wasn't a plane.
Right.
But a missile couldn't do that. It couldn't be responsible for the facade damage.
No, this appears to have been a blowout. Remember, they had that spray-painted punch-out right beside this C-ring?
It is, and it's...
There it is. Here. You got it.
But this is what I think we're looking at here, is a rapid wall-breaching kit, or actually a large one.
Ooh, I love it, Steve. I love it.
And so they would, when you're talking the Pentagon, they have access to all of this stuff.
Of course.
And what they did is apparently I think they may have launched either a Tomahawk or some sort of cruise missile with like a blast that could cause that damage to the facade. It shattered the brick and face of it, but didn't punch a hole in it. So it wasn't a bunker buster like a JSAM. The original reports were what? I think it was a truck bomb that was at first reported, that the suspicion was a truck bomb went off. But of course, I'm not prepared for this, but the photographs of the actual facade, the front, don't show a lot of damage right at the base of it. It's just like,
Right.
if it was a truck bomb, it wasn't right on the ground. So maybe they did hit it with a blast of like a cruise missile, but it didn't do what they thought it was going to do. So they had to scramble and then send in some secondary explosives to
Right.
collapse the roof.
Right.
And then to make it look really bad, they set off other secondary explosives on the interior to give the teeth to that rumor that, you know, the accountants were just shut up for the Rumsfeld thing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to get to the Rumsfeld thing here next.
Well, that's good. But you go back to that hole in the C ring. It's too surgical. Look how perfectly round it is. I mean, I think your theory about this.
Oh, right here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Go to the next one. Yeah. Those. I mean, look, that's perfectly round.
Yeah, and I've gone through. I mean, I've looked at the way they built these things, and there's nothing special. This is a brick lined, you know, light brick, you know, a couple layers of brick and maybe light concrete facing to it. Nothing special about it. The wall breaching kit would do this to it. Absolutely cause this sorts of damage, and it'd be a piece of cake for them to do. And we will believe it if they tell us.
We just have a bunch of
did
junk here, Steve. There's no plane parts there.
Yeah.
No
and
wings,
right,
no
though.
tail, no fuselage. I like this. I like this.
And I stand corrected. I didn't think that in your video you mentioned that what was it, that they had reinforced this area of the Pentagon. I thought that wasn't true, because I thought they just remodeled it. They didn't reinforce it. But you're right, they did. They put blast resistant windows in there. And
well, Steve, they didn't want it to spill over. See, they wanted it to be confined to the West Wing. I mean, they had a designated part they were willing to surrender for this staged event, but they didn't want
to set it up for that. Yeah. But they even put structural reinforcement in there. It wasn't like to prevent the blast, but it was they reinforced it.
It was to
contain
it.
Right.
It was to contain it.
Exactly. It was just too darn.
They love that building, right?
Isn't it? Yeah. So, but yeah, this is
Smoke machine. I love it, Steve. I love
it. One of the things that I learned about smoke machines is that all it is just a smoke fluid. I used to sell fireworks as a kid. I used to blow stuff up a lot. Actually, I caused a lot of fires. My clothes, when I was a teenager, always had pinholes from exhaust from explosions, and you know, I played around with black powder. And smoke machines are really cool because all it is, it's a heating element that has smoke fluid that's poured onto it, and at the right temperature it'll vaporize it and it makes a cloud of smoke. And then a military grade smoke machine is a pretty impressive thing to see, and it makes this roaring swooshing sound as it emits this cylindrical circular funnel of smoke, right, coming out of there. And if the temperature of the element is too high, it turns it into a flamethrower. So you'll have a burst of flame if you're still, you know, tweaking your your smoke machine. It's going to turn into a flamethrower. Too cool, and it's going to just squirt out hot fluid.
How interesting.
So watch this. With that in mind, let me back up. I got the wrong one there. Let's click on this guy. Oh, that's just a picture of it. Okay, so this is a guy who built a big ass smoke machine for movies and special effects. And just listen to the sound. I hope you can hear it.
Okay. Now it's coming up.
Yeah. You hear that? That's the jet. It's jet powered. Yeah. That's the whine you hear is the jet power. But after he starts the smoke machine, you should be able to hear this sound. Sometime.
I'd worry about setting the house on fire.
There we go. So you can hear that sound.
Yeah, swish.
That roar.
Yeah.
Here is the photographer who caught the Pentagon just as they turned on the smoke machine. It startled the photographer, and he looks over at the direction of the smoke machine off to the right here, and you can see briefly 2 quick bursts of flame when they were trying to tweak that element to not be a flamethrower. Okay, watch this. I should have started it a little late. There he goes, right there. He just turns and looks, and you can see briefly.
I see the smoke machine in the upper right.
He turns the camera. What was that? And you can see the cloud of white smoke right there, right?
Yeah.
Not much to see there, but on the next slide,
It's embarrassingly bad.
well, this is the comparison I was going to, a little clip I did a long time ago. You've probably seen this.
I like this. I like this.
The sounds you're hearing are actually from the Pentagon. You hear that swooshing sound, and you can see the burst of flame. You see those two bursts of flame there?
I love it.
They use smoke machines, man.
You're doing a great job, Steve. I love it.
I cannot believe this.
I love it.
But yeah, that's basically all I have for the Pentagon.
Well, that's
really
wonderful tweaking. I love it.
Thanks. Do you want to touch on the?
Do you want me to pause while we set up something?
Yeah, sure. Do you want to move on to the World Trade Center? Okay, so we're skipping around, and we may not even want to use this one, but yeah. So a lot of people are familiar with the first impacts, right? The Hertz-Arcani footage. Everybody's pretty much familiar with this guy, and a lot of people think this is a hologram. Okay, I'm doing this frame by frame just to show you at one point where this is what happens is you've got this self-healing building. To me, which
is incidentally surprisingly absent of details.
It is, and
I mean, it's like a blob. It's
well, and I have a video where I actually cut it out and show you how easy it is to do that. So, and it's all very blurry. You see that the footage is terrible. All of this stuff is, but this guy allegedly took this footage while on a tour boat with a handheld camera. That's the whole story behind this guy, and I tell you, it has been really vexing to try to figure out how he did this, because it's always wobbling. I mean, one of the keys with any footage like this, any fakery is to use a
stabilized version.
Yes, a tripod. So I'm trying to click on this darn thing here. So tripods and dollies have been used by movie magicians since the dawn of the motion picture, right? I mean, that's how it's done. That's how you make things appear and disappear on camera. That's why they use dollies like this, is because they get the control they want. Well, when we're watching this guy's footage, Hertz-Arcani's all over the place. You see him bouncing around. Well, what he is he's using a tripod or a dolly, but he's pretending he's an amateur on a tour boat. You can see the sideways rocking going at some points. But what most people don't do is they don't look at what happens after the impact or before the impact. Because I've messed around with cameras a lot, and I love to make like footage of Christmas and show Christmas videos and stuff, goofy stuff for my family. And I love to mess around with tripods. You can make things disappear and reappear, and have all kinds of fun with it. So when I was looking at this footage, I would wonder how the heck this guy did this, because if I was going to do it, I'd have to do it with a tripod, and if I was going to do it to fake it, then I would have to have a stable platform to do it on as a starting point. So if I was going to fake the footage of the plane before the plane showed up, the camera would have to be on a stable platform. So I started looking before the plane showed up, and sure enough, Jim, there are 15 frames where there is practically no movement whatsoever, 3 of which are 0 movement. Even 2 frames of no movement would
proving it was a tripod.
It is. So this guy was on dry land with a tripod-mounted camera, pretending he was an amateur on a tour boat with a handheld camera. Can you believe this bullshit?
Love it. Love it.
And so all of this stuff is fake. It doesn't matter. It does. The explosion is real. Of course, that's real, because that all matches wherever you look at it. All of the explosion photographs match. And there are actually photographs from the same perspective. But what happens is, after this guy impacts, is when the gash appears. See, he's got it blurry. He's just, okay, the explosion's just happened. We pan away, and you can't see any gash there. You see that? Look at that. There's no gash there. He's fuzzing it out. He's just blurring it out with fake smoke, so you can't see it, because he was just been really close, and there wasn't a gash there. You know that flame gash that just appears out of nowhere after the plane impacts, and then boom, there's a hole there? This is how they do it. He just blurs it up a little bit, and then he zooms in, and now you can see it. And then from this point forward, it's all real time. It's all a real-time play. They don't have to do anything else. All the fakery's been done, and now it's just propaganda.
And how is the gash created?
Well, that is the topic of the next episode. That is, we discussed that a little bit in the last time, but I'd like to go into it in a lot more detail and focus mostly on that for the next episode. I'd like to back up a little bit though and look at the flame gash, which was what occurred, which you mentioned in your video. The Naudet shots.
Yeah.
Naudet was also using a tripod. Okay, he and his brother. This is Jules Naudet. His brother Guédon, or Guédon, however you pronounce it. Were trying to look like amateurs as well, because that's their whole backstory. Was they're amateur photographers who just happened to be.
Did I mention that their name, Naudets, is an anagram of Duane Street?
Duane Street. Yeah.
Isn't that something? How insulting can you get?
Well, they look at all the names they keep.
How insulting can you get, Steve?
Well, they think we're stupid, and we keep proving them right. But
I know. My track record is almost unmatched.
It is. It's really terrible. But the Naudets, I've heard, were responsible for organizing all of the plane shots. They were actually, what I heard, were the producers that got all of the amateurs to work together. And you can see even on the Naudet footage, like their video 9/11, there is footage from Luc Cortez in there, and that was like years before it was released. Were they in contact with these guys? Yes, of course they were. All of the photographers were in contact. That's how he got Luc Cortez footage on their
sure, they had to figure out when's the right time to release this bit or that bit.
But they're just human, and they make all kinds of mistakes.
Right, like the 14 and 17-second discrepancy between the explosions in the sub-basements and the purported strikes of the planes.
Yes, and there's all sorts of discrepancies that they can't fix, but they don't need to because they have their media.
And people overlook them, aren't paying attention, don't know what they're looking at.
And it's all coming at them over like what's his name?
Especially from authoritative sources, Steve.
Yes, so they would believe everything they're told. But here, this is the flame gash I was referring to, where it just appears out of nowhere, right? It just looks like you've got this burst of flame. And I know that Simon Shack did a big deal about it here, but it's there. It's hard to see. It's just there. What is happening is the gash has already been cut. It's all about the timing. But in the Naudet footage, you can't see it. You can't see him on the tripod in the impact footage, but you can see him take the camera off the tripod, and you can see before the footage, his steady panning around the intersection proves he was on the tripod. He was using a tripod, absolutely. That's how he was able to spin the camera so quickly and center the building right here to be able to capture this impact, was because he had practiced this shot. His tripod had been anchored to the ground, and he had turned around to a pre-practice location, and boom, he was able to focus and get this shot. And here you can see him taking the camera off the tripod after the impact. It wobbles. And right here, he's going to jump into the truck with Fetzer, and you can see the wobbling as he's taking the camera off the tripod. I'll do another bit about that later. But as far as the gash appearing out of nowhere goes, you can actually see it in the footage. He zooms in, and it is here. It's hard to see on YouTube because of our resolution, but it is there. You touched on William Rodriguez.
Yes.
You know, he's a con artist.
No, Willie was an assistant to James Randi?
Yes.
Really? Tell me about this.
That's right. As a young man, Rodriguez
Tell me about this.
worked under the stage name of Rowdy as an assistant magician to magician James Randi. He was adroit at insinuating himself into the good graces of Randy's targets and eliciting incriminating information, and that he had previously been featured on television in Puerto Rico escaping from a chained straitjacket while hanging from a burning rope.
Willie Rodriguez.
A con artist, yes. And this is how they do
Go
it.
on, go on.
They give you both sides of the argument, because James Randi, of course, gave us JREF, the James Randi Educational Foundation,
who have been ferocious critics of anyone who questions the official narrative of 9/11.
Yes, and these are the international skeptics I mentioned at first. They have renamed themselves and are now no longer JREF, they are international skeptics. James Randi. So James Randi birthed the skeptics, and then William Rodriguez represents the other side. This is controlled opposition at its best. You've got two sides of the argument. Rodriguez is telling us that he saw this stuff, he saw what's his name get burned up and all this, you know. But his story means that in order for that to have happened, the fuel from Flight 11 had to take the first elevator to the lobby, and before it detonated in the lobby. So that's the official story, Jim, is 60% of the fuel, it detonated or erupted, and the rest of it took the first elevator to the lobby before it erupted.
I know, it's just absurd. The whole thing is absurd.
But he was also part of...
well, Willie did tell me about the sub basements filling up with water, which I took to be the most important observation he made.
Well, and this is what they do, is they will tell a few good stories too, but they will lie about the really important stuff. He used to also be close with Governor Cuomo.
Yeah, I worked in his office.
Yeah, and he also ate breakfast on Windows of the World.
Scheduled his... Well, I wonder if he ate there with Larry Silverstein and his daughter.
Well, one of the things I wanted to touch on was that earlier in this presentation here, we talked about the who are they? The gelatin guys. Right?
Yeah, the gelatin group. Yes.
And that's the art group that
the Israeli art students.
Actually, they are from Vienna.
Vienna,
Austria. And yeah, that's the other thing, is that we get a lot of bad information about these guys. But yeah, let me bring up gelatin. These are the gelatin guys. Okay. And one of the things I want to point out is how dismantled this space is. The gelatin story is that these, well, first of all, let me tell you about...
We got the wrong image up here right now, Steve. Do you want me to pause?
Sorry. I'm sorry.
Want me to pause? Want me to pause?
Yeah, I think so. Okay, thanks for your patience. Yeah, I found the gelatin guys here. I went totally out of order. These we're told they're Israeli, but that goes back to like 2003. And you know how, the old saying that the best way to control the opposition is to lead it ourselves.
Sure.
Well, that was one of the first stories that was put out there, was about the Israeli connection. And actually, I don't know how true that is, but the official story of these guys is they're from Vienna, Austria. And they were part of a, which is called the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council, where that
could, of course, be a cover story. I mean, rather than Tel Aviv.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
But the story is that the Port Authority and the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council leased out a couple floors, whole floors, for the use to be used as art studios for students.
Building a clubhouse out of cardboard boxes?
Yeah, that's what they were noted for. That's about all they did. And you can look at the art that these guys did. I have a bunch of slides I didn't include, but yeah, I will on the next one, where we go over, if you look at just Google these guys, and there's a bunch of photographs that show the space. These were there's like that these were the last photographs they were taking of the towers as they're being dismantled. That's what I see here, because they only had a certain window before there was nothing left to take photographs of. And that's what it looks like. I could be totally wrong, but the gelatin guys provided a lot of photographs.
You're suggesting they were emptying out the towers in order to destroy them, to salvage whatever was worth salvaging.
Yes, and because that's what the evidence I've seen leads to. And the gelatin guys were only on the 91st and 92nd floor, actually only on 91st, for only 6 months in the spring of 2000. This is the photograph they did. This is them allegedly standing outside of a window on a balcony that they made out of wood. This is sort of a drawing of their balcony that they stuck it out the window. This is him standing outside the window here, and a guy counterbalancing him on the other side. And they rented a helicopter, Jim. So think about that, because what I see here with these guys is a reconnaissance team, a military reconnaissance team, scoping out the towers to see how best to photograph them, and maybe even how best to stage the jumpers. And
okay.
If you see, this guy here he's wearing a little harness.
Yeah.
And they're trying their best to look like artists, but you know damn well that the intelligence service.
They look like they're wearing brassieres. Are any of these women?
No, they're men, but I think they were wearing brassieres. They're mad. They're artists. What are you going to do? You know? And I think that's part of their cover, really, because who's going to suspect these guys as being CIA? Well, or Mossad. I do.
Right.
And I'm not alone. I mean, Let's Roll Forums is where a lot of information comes from for this. In any case, one of the things a lot of people don't know about the Port Authority is that the World Trade Center was guarded. They had an armed guard. So anything that the gelatin troop was doing, they were doing with the blessing of the Port Authority police, because there were 42 police officers stationed there. They were it says here, one of the only buildings in the United States with its own police force. They had an armed guard preventing anybody from wandering down the wrong elevator. It was the perfect place to set up a gigantic magic trick. And believe it or not, there was losses claimed for all the art that was lost up there.
And you know how valuable art can be, Steve.
Yes. And
those could be very substantial claims.
There were hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of art lost.
Especially the cardboard clubhouses.
Yes, just ask the artists. They'll tell you how much they're worth. Anyway, if you look at the tenant list, the 91st floor says here was American Bureau of Shipping Engineers. And here it says, dig this, Silverstein. He happened to also be on the 91st floor. But they also do say Lower Manhattan Cultural Council. So he shared the 91st floor with the artists.
That's pretty damn odd.
Isn't that weird? And it just gets better and better. That rumor, you wanted a link, that rumor goes to Austria, that they hail from Austria, but the Mossad rumor goes back to 2003 to this guy who has links to Berlin. But believe it or not, these guys, the gelatin troop, were not the only ones who rented a helicopter and took photographs of the World Trade Center right before 9/11. E-Team did the same thing. Says right here, we're in a helicopter. And they were taking photographs to see if they could see people from the inside taking photographs from the outside. Well, this goes back to the whole design of the World Trade Center towers and how they are unique. And allegedly it was Yamasaki's fear of heights that made him design the windows so narrow. But that was one of the biggest complaints, is that they were chopping up the views, right?
Well, it was also to ensure that the building didn't heat up too much and overwhelm the air conditioning system.
Yes, because the windows were back set about 12 inches from the face, so that would prevent all but direct sunlight from hitting them. It would also prevent all but direct views from seeing them. They're very difficult to see into from the outside.
Yeah,
So
but
if,
I don't know that was.
I don't know, when you
Yeah.
look at the history of Yamasaki, and we'll touch on that on the next time,
Okay.
he had CIA background, heavy ties to the military industrial complex. Anyway, we've hit our hour. You want to keep going, or?
Well, we could only for a few minutes because, you know, we had a few extra minutes because of our pauses.
Sure. So gelatin, there was also an artist on those 2 floors that was taking photos of the spaces as if they were, you know, worthy of photographs. Look at this. This is just crappy building. There's nothing. These are not modern marvels in my book. Look at these spaces. They're low space. That's an 8-foot ceiling, floor to ceiling. That's a low ceiling for office space. For an acre of floor, that's a very low ceiling. And from what I've read about these spaces, they were poorly lit because there's so little light available, and they were depressing on the inside. They didn't have light switches at first because it was all automated lighting. What I'm getting at is if
They didn't
wanted,
even have light switches?
the tenants had to pay extra for light switches. I shit you not. They were built originally with automated lighting, sprinkle. You know, they didn't even have fire extinguishers.
Right, Bill
Automated
75, right.
Yeah, and it was automated lighting. And at a time when we were trying to save energy because, you know, the gas crunch in the 70s, it was a big deal. People wanted to turn off the lights in their office and they couldn't do it. So they had to pay extra for light switches, and that pissed people off. So we have these, look at the buildings. They're not modern marvels by anybody's standards. All of these spaces look like they're being demolished and gutted. Whether they're going to replace them with another tenant, who's guess. But there's nothing special about this tower
When were
at
these
all.
taken? There you even have a basin.
Yeah, a basin sitting there, a sink sitting here, as if
Yeah.
they're gutting the place.
Bizarre.
So if they were gutting it for demolition, this
Bas-
looks like they hurriedly went in there to grab a few photographs before the place was completely gutted, so that we could have propaganda photographs published that say that the place was occupied. That's what I see here. Look at this shit. I mean, look at all the dust all over here. How long was this stuff here? And this was in 2000 when these were taken, Jim. This is the 85th floor of this second tower. How do I know that? Because I looked up these guys here, Harris Beach and Wilcox.
Well, look at the ceiling there. I mean, all these open.
I know. Everywhere you look.
You're telling me the condition of the towers at this point in time was deplorable.
It was a white elephant.
Substandard.
Yeah, and yet we are to believe that the hotshot big brokerage firms like Cantor Fitzgerald and Marsh McLennan with 600 employees were just hopping to get into this space.
You're inclined to believe that's all a myth.
Yes. Well, it is hard to believe that, but these are the good old, that's the 1% we're talking, right?
I think this is good. This is good, Steve. Do you have a couple more you want to throw in before we conclude today?
Well, we can get into the truck bomb.
No, that's okay. Just about the building. No, we'll come back to that.
We'll come back to it then. I'll come up with because again, I thought I was prepared. I was not. But next time I would like to discuss the buildings in greater detail.
Steve, for openers, I think this is terrific. You've really talked about some important tweaks. I'm benefiting from this greatly about how it was done in Shanksville, about the use of the smoke machine at the Pentagon, the gelatin group and as a reconnaissance outfit and all that. I think this is extremely valuable, and I'm very appreciative, and I look forward to our next round.
Thanks. I hope to get my act together better next time. And
that's all right.
To be more linear, but yeah, I look forward to it too, because I think this is really important information. To me, it's not about being right; it's just about being accurate. And
I think you're getting into some nooks and crannies that I've not been exposed to before. I love it. I think it's great.
Okay. Well, good to talk to you, Jim.
This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Real Deal, with my special guest, Steve Dock. We're talking about tweaking our understanding of what happened on 9/11. More to come.
Thanks again.